Deep Green Philly is a multimedia, alternative media blog project I started back in 2011. And one thing I really like to do with Deep Green Philly is look at the history and look at like the deeper meanings. So for me, the trash story here in Philly doesn't start here in Philly, because the neighborhoods where most of the trash is located are neighborhoods where mostly Black and brown people live. And most of us weren't here a century ago, honestly. We came here, a lot of us came here because of the Great Migration, which was essentially one of the largest internal migrations within a country in world history. About 6 million people migrated from the South to the North between like 1900 and 1950. And of course, people were fleeing Jim Crow, they were fleeing lynchings, they were fleeing all sorts of messed up things that were going on. So what happened once they got here in Philadelphia? Once they got here in Philadelphia, they had to deal with a different kind of racism, a more institutional form, like redlining. And we can see in this redlining map that a lot of the neighborhoods that were redlined back in the 30s, like North Philly, Southwest Philly, parts of South Philly, these are the neighborhoods in Philly that struggle the most with trash, litter, blight, crime. And essentially what happened is that people were stuck in these neighborhoods. They couldn't even get a loan from the bank to fix up their house. They couldn't get equity to send their kids to school. So they were stuck in these rundown neighborhoods. And this is kind of what they look like on the bottom left right here. That's what happens to neighborhoods that were redlined. And then trash starts piling up. City services that were once available when the city was mostly white started disappearing once the city started turning more Black and brown. That's essentially what happened. I love this image because it shows, like I said, the redlining juxtaposed against the city's waste and litter map. So you can see it matches up almost precisely. The neighborhoods that were disinvested in back in the 1930s, they're still struggling with all these social pathologies today. So what I've heard from a lot of people working on the trash issue here in Philly is that they feel like they are being treated like trash by the city or by institutions. They feel like they have been totally discarded and ignored and left to the side, just like a piece of trash. And I was thinking, how did this originate? But this originates within our own culture. This originates within how Black people first arrived here in this country in the first place. This image of the slave ship is really interesting because this is what kind of helped spark off the movement to end slavery, the abolitionist movement, because people had no idea what was really going on. They knew people were arriving here, but they didn't know how insane the conditions were that people were being shipped over here like sardines. And I want you to one day when you get a chance, get a measuring tape and measure 2 feet and 7 inches. That's how much space people had in the bottom of the ship. So you look at this bottom section of the ship on the left-hand side, they would squeeze people at the bottom of the ship side by side, shackled together, 2 feet, 7 inches. That's how much space they had. That space would often fill with water. So many of these people would drown on the way across the ocean, and their bodies were simply tossed overboard like trash. And millions of people died during the Middle Passage. So there are millions of skeletons littering the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Africa to the Americas, one of the original trash heaps of our civilization. So in the top middle, something that a lot of people don't know that happened, this was a genocide that happened in Southwest Africa, the Herero people. So the German army came there. They tried to colonize this area, and these people decided to fight back. So what did the Germans do? They put these people in concentration camps. The concentration camp system that we know from World War II began with the Germans putting Africans in concentration camps in Africa and treating them literally like things. They were starved to death, beaten, worked to death. You can see how skinny they are. These are survivors that managed to survive the genocide. This idea or this phenomenon that we have in our society today of disposability, especially of people being disposable, this goes way back in history. This goes way, way back. And we can't understand what's happening today without understanding the past, right? So what happened during World War II? The things that were set in motion in Africa and other places kind of whiplashed and hit Europe and started happening in Europe as well. I want to read a little bit from a really interesting book. This book is called The Cunning of History, and this is from the introduction. Rubenstein is forcing us to reinterpret the meaning of Auschwitz, especially, though not exclusively, from the standpoint of its existence as part of a continuum of slavery that has been engrafted for centuries onto the very body of Western civilization. Auschwitz was slavery in its ultimate embodiment. Rubenstein is making us understand that the origins of Auschwitz are actually embedded deeply in a cultural tradition that stretches back to the Middle Passage from the coast of Africa and beyond, to the enforced servitude in ancient Greece and Rome. Rubenstein is saying that we ignore this linkage and the existence of the sleeping virus in the bloodstream of civilization at risk of our future. And I found that last part to be interesting because now we're all trapped in our houses because of a virus that's running out of control because we're destroying nature and treating nature as disposable, treating animals as disposable, treating our ecosystems as disposable. And these things have echo effects. They have ripple effects. They don't just stay where they are. They're going to come back on us eventually. I'm going to have a little bit more to say about this a little bit later. So this kind of shows my own personal history of, how I have gotten involved in this trash issue through working in coalitions and joining movements, supporting grassroots efforts. This slide on the left shows a board meeting. We all packed in there. We were saying, no, we don't want this gas plant. But of course, they went ahead and did it anyway. And that's kind of why we're here today, because we want to find alternative ways of fighting back, and, creative ways of fighting back. The picture at the bottom is from Occupy. I don't like the phrase Occupy the Hood too much, but we were trying our best at the time. On the top right, that is a picture of people who have literally been pushed to the margins of society and treated like dirt for the entire existence of this country. Native Americans, I was out there doing some Native American support work back in 2015. This is the elder I was living with, giving her great granddaughter her coming of age ceremony. They were baking a cake in the ground. It's really interesting to see the depth of culture for people who have been totally just pushed aside and ignored. They have so much to teach us, but we're just not listening. All right, so what am I working on today? That's me with Councilman Squilla on the left. This is the part of our plastic bag campaign. I'm out there trying to use art and creativity as a vehicle for promoting environmental justice and climate justice. On the bottom right, this is the Philadelphia Assembled Sanctuary Dome that was downtown for about a few months. Lots of interesting programming happening in there. Another social practice art project that was really interesting. So what about the future? What's going on in the future? I really like this slide of me with our Trash Academy youth. I mean, it sounds cliche to say this, but the youth really are the future. We really have to make sure that they understand what's at stake. They understand what's happening. They understand the past. They understand really that their future is on the line. And we have to start fixing these problems. We're using educational tools like the toilet paper implosion. We have another one for plastic bags as well. And there's another picture with our whole Trash Academy cohort with some of these youth summer people. And I mean, I hadn't really worked with youth like that before doing Trash Academy, but I really enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. They really understand what's going on more than people give the credit for, definitely. The image on the left, this is a picture drawn by one of our Trash Academy members who is an art teacher in Philadelphia Public Schools, showing how nature is being turned into a commodity. And that was part of our toilet paper implosion project. On the right is our social practice art project down in Buick Park. I just really love this moment. You can see the storage container in the background and the kids just hanging out in a park that was once kind of just junky and trashy and just not a place you could really want to sit in. And I really just liked how it was transformed even temporarily into a place where people could have some community. So a major thing I try to do with Deep Green Philly is challenge dominant narratives and narrative filters. The way that we see the world can also many times put blinders on us like a horse, and we just don't see certain things. And so, for example, this quote from Berta Cáceres talking about capitalism, and many people have a narrative filter on where they think capitalism is good and it's wonderful and it's amazing and it's the best thing that ever happened to us. It really creates wealth and it creates stability. But in reality, is that really true? Once we start looking at the details and start looking at, who is benefiting from capitalism and who is suffering the most, we start seeing it's mostly white people, white men, men in general, who are benefiting from capitalism. And it is contrary to life, ecology, human beings, and women. That's just a fact. I'm sorry. We can't even argue that. On the right, someone I really appreciate a lot, Layla Abdel Rahim. And when we're talking about the cruel economy of civilization, I want you to think back to those slides with the slave ship and with the pictures of the Holocaust and whatnot. That's that cruel economy. That's what our system is built on. It's built on slavery. It's built on people being turned into objects, people being turned into things to be used by other people. And then if they're not useful, they're discarded. They're turned into trash. And then finally, something that we're dealing with right now, the disposability of workers. The fact that they're trying to open schools right now when they're not even trying to vaccinate the teachers. They're not trying to vaccinate the people who are cooking your food. They just want them to work. They just want them to work, to be there, to do your bidding or to do our bidding. And if they die, they die. But this dynamic is not new. America's first essential workers were slaves. They didn't have a choice, right? But many people today don't have a choice either, because if they don't go out to work, they're going to be out on the street. They're going to be in a homeless shelter or just on the street. So do they really have a choice? I mean, I don't know. And so when people talk about this thing about essential workers and coronavirus, we have to understand that this didn't start just recently. This has been going on for a long time as well. The disposability of people. And I really want to hammer that point home because, of course, we understand what it means when trash and objects are disposable. But people are disposable in our society in a way that I don't think we often realize.